welcome back to another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. I am back with another author who is what you need. Her book is what you need for such a time as this. And the book is Decide to Be Your Future Self. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So before we get into the book, and we don't want to tell the listening, viewing audience everything that's in the book. They need to get their own copy. They can get a physical copy. They can get a Kindle copy, whatever type of book appetite reader they are. I'm a mixed. So like, no, you know what? Let me not lie. I prefer to have a physical book in my hand to turn the pages, but I will do, a Kindle version. It's just, I like to have that book and fall asleep with it on my lap or on my heart. It's something about it. So
Okay.
before we get into the book, tell our listening, viewing audience just about who you are, your background. You're from Jersey.
Yeah, well, living in Jersey, not originally from Jersey, but anyway, I'll tell you about my background. So, yes, today I'm an author. I'm a board certified life, career, and executive coach, but this isn't where I started. I was in corporate America for almost 40 years and was a global leader and just used to coach people all the time throughout my career and particularly had a passion for women. And so I was a co-lead for the Women's Leadership Employee Resource Group. I helped develop the mentorship and sponsorship pillars for that group and always working with women to try to elevate them and help them to really step into their next. And I got to a point in my career where I was anticipating a promotion, and I didn't get the promotion. And that caused me to stop in my tracks, so to speak, and think about what it is that I wanted to do next. And I thought I needed to take the reins here of my career. I couldn't just wait to see, well, maybe something would happen in a year or so. I thought, this is where I'm going to take the reins. So at that point, I went back to school, got my master's in organizational leadership, and started the journey to get multiple coaching certifications. And I decided to become my future self. And so that was the inspiration for the book that I wrote and, actually helped me to create this method that I use in coaching, which I have been practicing for many years.
Wow. So something that you said that literally hit me like a ton of bricks. So you mentioned being in corporate for 40 years, thought you were going to get the promotion, didn't, and you made a decision to choose yourself over the company.
Yes, because I realized that I was probably waiting for somebody else to create my next or to define my path. And truth be told, over the years, I had actually ended up in some roles that probably weren't my preference, but I went there because that's where I was needed at the time. And I had the skill set to do it, even though it might not have brought me as much joy as I would have liked. So this was just a time for me to kind of put myself first, bank on me instead of waiting for somebody else to validate me.
Wow. And you know what? When I reflect on my own journey of what I like to call being a corporate hero, I realized that the reason that I stayed so long was because of fear. Not that I didn't see my future self. I just was afraid to fail. I was too comfortable being comfortable.
Right.
And so I had to just pull the lever down and say, drop me out of here and let me move on to where I'm supposed to be.
Right.
So 40 years, you got your certifications, and then you said, I need to package up my journey so that I can help other women and people, because you knew that you were not alone.
Exactly. I knew I wasn't alone. And I actually had a great opportunity before I left my corporate role last year to become like a part-time, I call it. It was a stretch assignment, but I was an executive coach for women across the globe in a women's leadership development program. And that's what I heard a lot of times. Women wanted to do something next, but they were either afraid or they didn't believe in themselves. And so I knew that my journey wasn't unique and that there's something that I had here that I could share with the world to help them become better, become their future selves, and really just to lean into their skills and their talents.
I love it. I love it. And I too here, I don't have all the tools,
Mm-hmm.
but we do. We
Me too.
literally do. We
Yeah.
just, I was with the client the other day and I said, okay, I usually try not to give them, that tough love.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like a nut that I needed to
Mm-hmm.
crack. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, listen, girlfriend, you are your own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, I've been there. And so I try not to take up the session by telling, so much about my own journey
Right.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's not about me, it's about them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But once I started to disclose some of my ups and downs, it was like you could see the walls coming
Mm-hmm.
down on the Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
On the Zoom, you could kind of see her like sit back in the chair. She wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
this upright person. She just
Yes.
finally just exhaled.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, and we shed a couple of tears together.
Mm-hmm.
And I just told her that it's very uncomfortable to be who you're supposed to be, as opposed to who we think, like the stories that we tell ourselves in our head.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you are on a mission to help others soar
Mm-hmm.
because the time is now.
Absolutely no. And you can't look at what's happening around you, the circumstances. You have to make that decision to move forward because time is moving anyway. So why not make the best use of it?
Every
Yeah.
second is like happening
Hmm.
while we're sitting here.
Right. Yes.
So why don't you tell us about? I feel like you've told us about how you decided to
Hmm.
package your experience. So let's talk a little bit more about that. But let's get into this SOAR
Hmm.
framework, which
Yes.
let me just tell everyone is trademarked. If you have any conversation with me and you tell me about a method, a framework, a workshop, the first question I'm asking you is, are you trademarking that? So
Yes. Okay. So SOAR, it's SOAR. Excuse me. And SOAR stands for shift your mindset. That's the S. O is overcome challenges. A is activate your plan. And then R is reflect and refine. And so if you want to get to your future, the first thing you have to do is shift your mindset. You have to see yourself there. You have to believe you can be there. And that, as you were saying, that you already have the tools. So just look within you, shift that mindset, because you're going to need to do that to move any further. With a limiting mindset, you're not going to get any further in your future. And then
wow.
overcome challenges. Life is all about challenges, and we have to figure ways to overcome them. I mean, sometimes it's by ourselves, but sometimes it's with a support mechanism around us, whether it's mentors, friends, coaches. But there are ways to overcome challenges. And sometimes you got to break the challenge down into smaller bits and tackle a piece at a time instead of trying to eat the whole cake at once. So, and other times I tell people you might not be able to go around the challenge. You might have to go over the challenge. You might have to go through the challenge, but we need to overcome challenges that sometimes we set for ourselves. So that's the O. And then the A is activating a plan. So you shift your mindset, you have this vision, you've figured out how you're going to overcome challenges. But then you need to really take action. That's the activating, because otherwise it's just a dream and a wish. So you might set goals, you write them down, but then you've got to figure out, for me to get to that goal, what are the steps I need to take, and then start to take those steps. And then the R is reflect and refine. And the reflection is not only about looking at how far you've come, whether it's small steps or big steps, but it also includes celebrating the success along the way. You know, many times we decide that we're going to wait till we get to the big goal or the big end before we say, hip, hip, hooray, we did it. But we need to celebrate the little milestones along the way as well, because they keep us motivated, they keep us going. And then, of course, refine, because life isn't static, it's dynamic, and maybe things have changed and you want to shift what that future vision looks like. So it's okay to refine. So that's, you know, again, I can give you a personal, if I frame it in a personal way. So when I was faced with this, you know, decision, what am I going to do next? I had to shift the mindset that I could do this, that I could go back and get the credentials to be doing formally what I, you know, in a formal way, in a career way, what I had been doing all along throughout my career. And then overcome challenges. So as you can imagine, I was working a global full-time role, and I went back to school online part-time. And it was funny because I'd never taken an online class before. And I didn't know that part of what was required was for you to be in the portal and posting and answering questions from the professors and communicating with other classmates. And so when I got the grade for my first assignment, I was like, oh no, this is not going to work. So how I overcame that challenge, I had a 2-hour commute, sometimes on the train, on the bus, depending on which way I went that day. And I logged on, I used my phone as my hotspot, and I logged on my laptop, got into the portal, started to communicate, answered the professor, and then I got the real great grade that I wanted. So that's just an example of how you can overcome a challenge. I had to figure out how I was going to make use of these 2 hours so I could accomplish that goal that I had. And then, you know, the plan. Again, the plan was 1 course a semester because I couldn't handle more than that. But that was a plan. Get through that semester and then move on to the next one. And then reflect and refine when I, you know, again, I celebrated every time I got through a semester and I got a really great grade and I was doing well. And then, you know, said, okay, now reflection time has happened. And I'm going to step out on my own to do this thing that I love to do, which is coaching and writing books. So that was my journey through SOAR. And that's why I wanted to share it as a framework with others.
So there truly is a connection between our actions and our future.
Absolutely.
You wrote that. I didn't make that up. You wrote that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all aspects of that journey, because some people would have said, oh no, I don't do this XYZ grade. I'm done. This is not for me.
Right.
Instead of realizing, wait a minute, I can do this. I just need to adjust the how, which was, I'm on this train for 2 hours. When you said 2 hours, I was like, oh my gosh.
Right.
That's like Chicago traveling from the suburbs into the city.
Yeah.
It's a long commute, which I don't do.
You don't.
I am truly, I grew up in the city of Chicago, but I am truly now a suburban person. I want to drive very slowly, very mindfully. I want to get to my destination. I want to get back home. I'm not interested in that, you know, in the traffic for hours. Because to me, it takes so many years off your life.
It does. And then when I think about it, it's like, okay, it's time that you're not going to get back. So how can you use it productively, right? So that's what I decided to do to be able to meet the goal I had in mind.
And you did it because you're on the other side of it.
Totally on the other side. You know, I remember somebody saying to me when I told them I was going back and, you know, asked me, was I glutton for punishment? But Because they knew, I had a full-time job. I was on calls late at night sometimes with Asia. So, they knew what I was up against. So it's like, why are you doing this? But in my mind, I had that vision. And I knew that if I wanted to get there, I needed to just suck it up and do all the work that was required to get there.
Yeah, you know what? I told someone recently, in order to get to the place that you're supposed to be, you got to strip down to the bare minimum version of yourself so that you can go down to come back up.
Mm,
Because some people can't juggle, doing both.
right. Hmm.
Sometimes you do have to cut out that big portion of your life so that you can do the work to step into your next.
Hmm.
We talk about self-care, right?
Hmm.
And manicures and
Hmm.
pedicures.
Hmm.
But for some people, self-care is, you know what? Let me save up $25,000 or $20,000 and let me be off of this job for a month so I can create my
Right.
my my vision.
Hmm.
Because every day you log on to the computer, you're doing all of their work and you're miserable, and you get off, and the few hours that you have at night, you try to refuel, but you really don't. And then you get up the
Right.
next day and
Yeah,
do it
it's
all
a
over again.
cycle. Yeah.
Like this hamster wheel, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you
Yes.
don't get off until you take yourself off.
Yes. It's so true.
So I love how your book is, it's almost like a girlfriend having a conversation with you,
Hmm.
telling you that hey, you can do this. And let me tell you about some other folks that have done it. I love when I read books and you learn things about the people who we hold on this high pedestal.
Hmm.
You learn about what they did and you're like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, they did what? Like, I remember reading a book recently about Deion Sanders, who
Hmm.
in the book talked about trying to drive off of this cliff. I'm like,
Hmm.
what? Not prime time, not him,
Right. Yeah.
right? We always think that they just arrived at those places. And I am
No.
the type of person who realized that they didn't just arrive. And I have to say, I have this bad habit. I'll see somebody and they're like, oh, this person is really all this. I start to Google them and realize, whoa, they went through a lot to get to the person that you see them
Absolutely.
today.
Yeah. But it's like you see the tip of the iceberg, you don't see what's beneath it and what it took to get there. And a lot of times people will say to, whether to somebody, oh, they're an overnight success. And it's not overnight. It's just that you didn't see all the late hours, all the hard work, everything that they put in to get to where they are.
Yes. And sometimes we do all the hard work,
Hmm.
we get to the place, and then still self-sabotage ourselves.
Yes, because we often don't believe in ourselves, and it's because of these limiting beliefs. Either we heard them when we were growing up, or we just believe that's who we are. And you really have to stop and say, is that really true? And what facts are there to back up what I'm telling myself? That I can't learn, I can't grow, whatever that message is. I think we need to check ourselves and validate if this is coming from fact, or is it just somebody's opinion that you've heard for a number of years, or something you might have seen on social media. And talking about social media, a lot of times what we see on social media are the
Fake.
glossy, you know oh, everything is wonderful, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So we have to be careful not to get caught up in that and run our own race and not compare ourselves to other people, but become our best selves, because we're all unique. We all have our talents. And if we don't figure out what they are and use them, then really we're not living life to the fullest.
Yes. And one of the things that I think we all have allowed ourselves to do, how when you were younger and you
Hmm.
were a kid and you were fearless, and
Yeah.
then life starts to happen and you're like, oh no, I can't do this, I'm afraid. I have a constant reminder of the
Mm-hmm.
5-year-old version of myself sitting on the wall here. And I have her positioned here so that it's a constant reminder that I can do all the things that I want to do. I am worthy of doing
Mm-hmm.
those things. I don't mind creating a plan. I'm really big
Mm-hmm.
on not only writing goals down, but executing the goals.
Mm-hmm.
I know I can't do everything alone, soliciting
Right.
help. That 5-year-old version of myself just as a constant reminder that I can do it. And I look at her and she's smiling
Mm-hmm.
and she's fearless. And so
Mm-hmm.
I aspire to be her every day.
I love that. I might steal that idea because there are times when I even say to myself, wow, when I was younger, it was like I was fearless. I mean, when I think about some of the things I advocated, for myself, and just some of the risks I took, and it's like I'm like, okay, I need to get back to that. I think either I've got too comfortable, or things have worn me down, moving through life. But it's let me go back to that because I really had a lot of like tenacity that I need to step back into. So I'm totally there with you.
Yes. I also have funny thing. I have another picture of me, and this is hilarious. So, do you remember back in the day, the car had the cigarette lighters?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I have this other picture of me where my dad went into my grandmother's house. He left me in the
Mhm.
car. This was in
Uh-huh.
the early 70s. And he says, "Don't touch anything."
Right.
So he left. I pushed that button, pulled that thing popped out and stuck my finger
And
in
it was
it.
bright red. It was hot.
But that was also a lesson
Hmm.
that you don't have to go through life alone. There are
Right.
others that have been through the things that can offer you some wisdom,
Hmm.
and you have to lean into that wisdom and not
Right.
just, stick your finger in the loop.
Yes. I'm sure that was painful.
And every time I look at my finger, I'm
Mhm.
often reminded of that day. And I smile because number one, I'm grateful that my father is still around.
Mhm.
But I'm also grateful for the lesson.
Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted you to talk a little bit about the value as well as some setbacks with creating the plan. Once you make the decision that you're
Mhm.
going to be your future self, talk about that plan, the setback, and then keep moving forward.
Yeah. So again, once you make that decision and you create the plan, it's never going to be, without bumps, so to speak. So you might have a setback where maybe you're not achieving it in the time frame that you wanted. Maybe you might have been too aggressive with the time frame, but that's okay. Then you can go back and say, maybe give myself another month or two, depending on what you were hoping to get done, and then continue to work towards it. Because a setback is not something that should derail you. Setbacks are setting us up for success. And many times we don't realize that, though. We think of a setback as, oh my gosh, this is the end of the road here. I need to go start over. Not necessarily. There might be a lesson there that you need to learn, and it could be pointing you somewhere different than where you thought you were originally going. So I would say if there are setbacks, figure out if what's in your control to manage through that setback. But if it's something that's outside of your control, then accept it and just keep moving on.
Absolutely. One of the things I do with my annual personal strategic plan
Hmm.
is I evaluate it. Now, don't judge me, but I evaluate my goals every Friday. There is a notification that sends
Hmm.
me an email to go and check the goals.
Wow.
And when I'm meeting with my virtual assistant, who
Hmm.
also has the goals, right? Because she can't help me achieve the goals if she's
Right.
not a part of them. And sometimes I'll say to her, you know what? That goal, that's a great goal, but I don't think now is the right time for that
Right.
goal. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll move it to the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll say, you know what? This goal is nice, but I need to tweak it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see it as failure or a
No,
setback. I
not at all.
literally see it as a win.
Exactly. And that's part of that R in sorts, that refining, because we often have to refine things again. You look at it and you say, I might do it next year. It's not for now because I have other priorities going on. So that you're right. It's not a failure.
And I think sometimes we think it's a failure because we spent all that time putting that goal in
Right.
place. We were
Mhm.
sure at the
Mhm.
time that it was going to be all good, but
Right.
then you realize it wasn't, and it's okay.
It's okay. But you learned along the way. Even if you didn't accomplish the goal, you are growing, and that experience can be used to accomplish a different goal. So it goes back to mindset. If you think of everything that you're doing as part of getting you to where you want to be in the future, and really not discounting any step that you're taking along the journey.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I remember um at the time, this was, and I remember it like it was yesterday,
Hmm.
November 2022.
Wow.
I was juggling working full time at a university online,
Hmm.
and I had my healthcare consulting business. I even had a
Hmm.
commercial office space because I was teaching online, right? So I could log in from
Right.
anywhere. And it wasn't like real time teaching, right? Like I was
Hmm.
in the classroom back in the day. And so I was working on a request for proposal, RFP,
Hmm.
for this large project. And I was like, okay, this is the project that's going to allow me to quit my job
Hmm.
because I didn't want to give up that income.
Right.
And so I'm working, working, working. I pushed the button to submit the RFP. The time to submit had expired. So I learned a couple of lessons about
Oh
doing it
my.
early. But I submitted it and the time had expired and I got an error. And the error said, you didn't complete the portion about how you will fulfill the minority business component of the contract. And I
Mm.
was like, I don't need to fill that out because I am the minority. I'm the minority business
Right.
owner, right? And so once that happened, I literally lied on the floor in my commercial office space
Hmm.
and cried
Oh.
and cried. And my husband was sitting over in the corner in the office, and he I guess he didn't know what to do. So he just he just stayed in the corner.
Oh.
And after laying on the floor crying, I realized that that happened for a reason. Number one, I really didn't want to continue that healthcare consulting company business. I had started another business
Mhm.
March of that year, which would really allow me to operate solo, meaning I
Mhm.
didn't want to have any staff, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that contract, which was large, would
Mhm.
have required me to hire medical coders.
Mhm.
I would
Mhm.
have been responsible for them. And I
Right.
realized that that happened because it was time for me to close the door on that portion of my life so that
Mhm.
I could step into where what I was supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And I'm so glad that I did it because I'm like, I don't want to manage people anymore,
Right.
even
Mhm.
in my own business. And
Mhm.
so what I thought was a setback was actually designed for me to move forward. But when I was laying on the floor, face down, crying, I didn't realize it at the time. And then
Right.
somebody's like, "You're a grown woman doing all that crying." But I was crying because I was hurt. I was like, I
Yes.
failed, right?
Mhm.
And then I just went through these changes, and I was like, you know what? It was all by design,
Right.
and it happened so that you can tell others, because there was a lot of lessons that I learned. Like, even though
Mhm.
I'm a minority, I still got to fill out
Right.
that part.
Yeah, you still have to fill out the part. Yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, I had a situation years ago when the corporation I worked for in New York closed down the New York headquarters and was moving to California. And, you know, we had to make the decision. I was offered an opportunity to move, but are we going to move? And, ultimately we decided to go. And what I thought was this setback, because I don't know anybody in California. My family is not, I don't have any family there. Family is all on the East Coast. But the experience I got in the 5 years that I was there allowed me to get a promotion for the next role. So I thought it was a setback, but it actually was a setup for me to learn some new skills, get some exposure to senior leadership. So again, what we think at times is a setback is not a setback. It's really training us for the next.
Yeah, it's a lesson. And
It's a
what I
lesson.
tell people all the time, did you learn the lesson or did the lesson learn you?
It's interesting.
So, towards the end of the book, you talk
Mhm.
about staying motivated. What would you say to that woman or man who just doesn't feel, they don't have that natural motivation inside of them? What can they do to stay motivated um, in the midst of going through that journey of soaring?
Right. Yes. Well, there's extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So if they don't have the intrinsic motivation where it's, I want to complete this degree, or I want to write this book, or I want to get this new job, or I want to step into a new career, if internally they're not motivated, then I would say get some external motivation. So get some friends, colleagues, family who can support you and encourage you and show you the progress you're making. Many times we don't see the progress, but we actually are making progress. So surround yourself with others who can lift you up and encourage you and motivate you if you're not able to motivate yourself internally.
Wow. So something you said but didn't say, you need
Mhm.
a community, right?
Absolutely.
You need
Absolutely.
community. And for a long time, I was like the lonely entrepreneur
Mhm.
until I got with this mastermind community. And
Mhm.
it really, honestly, it helped me soar.
Mhm.
It was one of the driving factors for me quitting the job. So,
Mhm.
like, I started that mastermind community like November 2022.
Mhm.
The same time I was on the floor crying. And I remember, this is how you know you're on the right path. I
Mhm.
remember my boss at the university saying, well, we have this amazing opportunity for you to take this training. And it was
Mhm.
on the electronic health record. And I
Mhm.
was like, I can't do this training. I'm in a mastermind, right? So
Right.
everybody in the department did the training for me, but me. And I
Mhm.
explained to her, I was in this mastermind. I was paying a lot of
Right.
money to be in this
Mhm.
mastermind community. And from that moment on, she literally was on a mission to um, get me out of that company.
Well, I mean, she probably was realizing that you might not be there long term. So maybe she was saying, let me invest in somebody who I know is going to be here longer term.
Well, and the thing is, she had just gotten there, but
Ah.
what she realized was she couldn't control me.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her that, I seek opportunities to develop and grow. And I
Mm-hmm.
told her that, I've been at that university since 2008, that
Mm-hmm.
I was committed to doing the work that
Mm-hmm.
I had been doing, right? But every twist and turn, I could see her doing things to control me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
one day she said, we want to have you post on your social media page about our programs, and we'll give you the content that you can share. Now, this was December 2022. She was
Oh,
moving fast.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was like, no, I'm not. I don't want to post the school's content on my site. The school has a site, they should post on their own site.
Mm-hmm.
But because I had a following, she
Right.
thought that that was a great way to promote the program. And I
Yeah,
was
and the
like,
school. Yeah.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, no, I'm not going to be a brand ambassador. Brand ambassadors get paid.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm like, Jerry Maguire, show me the money. So, here we are, almost 3 years later.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that I chose me. I'm so glad that I decided to be my future self,
Absolutely.
because I realized, at 50 something, tomorrow is not promised. And I had to act now so that I could have, first of all, a life where I'm at peace. My
Mm-hmm.
husband is like, I'm so glad you're gone. He was fully in support of me leaving. He said, I was so tired of you talking about that school. And so
Mhm.
just this morning, he said, it must be nice to just be able to get up at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the
Mhm.
morning and
Mhm.
just float around. And I said, yeah, it's
Mhm.
wonderful because
Mhm.
I chose me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You chose you.
So can you share with our listening, viewing
Mhm.
audience, what does the future hold for you?
The future for me? Good question. So,
You're
as
still young.
yes, exactly. I'm an author. So the future holds more books. So I have another book probably coming out in June-ish, about resilience and facing life's adversities. And I actually, through this journey, realized that there was creativity in me that I didn't know existed. So I actually have a children's book series, and I'm now at my seventh book in this children's book series. So there are more books in my future, and I just launched my Design Your Future Self with the SOAR Method online course that is now out there for people to walk through the method, and with journals and prompts and reflections, because again, I really want people to get to their future state and their future self. And more
Wow.
doing speaking at women's conferences. So that's my future self, because it's an evolution. I'm not there yet. I made the pivot, but I'm not there yet, and I'm also learning and growing into my future self.
And it's a daily walk, right? It's
It
not
is.
something that happens overnight.
No,
Um,
no.
and I love that you created a course with the book. So I
Mm-hmm.
too am in the midst of writing another book.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been very intentional about the different assets that will come with the book or
Mm-hmm.
available for purchase,
Mm-hmm.
because I see that the book is just this, you can read it multiple times, it's this one time experience.
Right.
But I needed something for them to have to keep going through the
Mm-hmm.
journey, right? And be supported and have community. And
Right.
so I'm so happy that you're doing that. I can't wait for the next book.
Thank
Everyone
you.
that knows me knows I love a good book. I'm looking at
Yes.
my bookshelves here. And you know what? You know what it is? And I talk about this 5-year-old girl,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the reasons that I love reading so much is because when I was in third grade, I was told that I wasn't comprehending what I was reading
Oh
because
my.
of a standardized test score.
Wow.
And my mother was told that I should repeat the third grade. And my
Wow.
mom was like, oh no, we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
When that test is not a true reflection of her talent, skills, and abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And my father actually had been taking us to the library to read, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that test could have been something that defined my future, right? Because I'm having to retake the course
Right.
again. And
Mm-hmm.
so I read and comprehend what I read because somebody said I couldn't. And
Right.
I am proving to them that I can, and I can help others realize
Yes.
the value of
Mm-hmm.
reading.
Yeah. So it's in one of my earlier books, "Flap Your Way to Success." I talk about when I was going through school, like you're saying about repeating the grade. So when I was going through school to move to the next grade, there was an exam to get to the next grade, and it was a national exam. My name was on the list, but my school principal didn't tell my parents my name was on the list. And so my father went actually to proctor the exam and called my name, and he's like, why isn't my child here? so so fortunately the school had their own entrance exam, and I took the entrance exam and actually came first place in that entrance exam and moved into the school, but left behind a number of my friends, about 3 of them, who also were being held behind by this principal who felt we were not ready. So again, sometimes people label us or have opinions about us, but that goes back to that. We've got to kind of put that aside and dig deep to see who are we and what do we want to believe about ourselves.
Wow. They really tried to play us, didn't they?
Yeah.
Listen, they didn't win. We are winning every single
Exactly.
day. And we're not just winning because we've been able to soar. We're
Mm-hmm.
winning because we're helping others soar.
That's the real reason I'm doing this. It's not about me. I really want to help others to do what they are envisioning in their hearts they want to do, because too many people are stuck, or I can't do this, or I'm afraid, I don't have the courage. And as we were talking about earlier, time is going, the clock's ticking, so take advantage.
Absolutely. So, listen, I really have enjoyed spending time with you. I hope everyone will purchase their own copy, because you don't realize that you're in this, like the airplane in the
Mm-hmm.
holding pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start to read the book, you realize I'm stuck
Mm-hmm.
and I need to become my future self, a better version of myself. Not that anything is wrong with you, but there's
No,
always better.
but there's better. Yes.
So, can you tell our
Mm-hmm.
listening, viewing audience where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to my website, www.andreacmclean, and make sure to put the C in there because there's another Andrea McLean in the UK, not me. So put the C. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Andrea C. McLean. And I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. So Andrea C. McLean, you'll find me.
Oh my gosh, I'm just reflecting back. We have come such a long way from that dial up internet.
Oh, oh my, oh my. I remember when email was, the first time it came into our corporation, and I was responsible for the team that was resolving customer issues on email. And we all had to learn how to deal with email, and it was like this huge deal. So look
And
at
look
where
at
we
us
are today.
today.
Yeah.
And you know what? The Jetsons cartoon from the 60s
Uh-huh.
predicted where we are today.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't here in the 60s. I came early 70s, but I
Hmm.
watched it in the late 70s,
Yes.
80s, because they rebroadcasted it.
Hmm.
But they portrayed the future we couldn't envision.
I know.
And
Yeah.
so I'm like, who's got the next version of what the next 20 years
That's
is going to
true.
look
Look
like? Because I
like.
want to see it.
Yes.
Even if it's a cartoon, I want to see it.
Uh-huh.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being a part of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. I wish you much success
Thank you.
in
Do you
your.
want me to show a copy of the book? Because I didn't know if you.
Yes. So I
Yes.
actually, mine is in the car, which is no
Okay.
longer at this house. It's my
Uh-oh.
husband took the car on a trip. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because
Mhm.
I had to wind up. Let me just show everybody, because I had to get another copy on my iPad.
Oh, okay.
I had to quickly get a backup.
Yes.
But listen, we're here. It was a setback, and we just kept on moving.
We just kept on moving.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yes.
yes. All right, everyone. This has been another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. I will see you next Saturday. Thank you.